Is using a shared Wi-Fi hotspot safe? Hi everyone, Leo Notenboom here for askleo.com. Here's the question. How come connecting to a trusted public hotspot is not a big security issue, since multiple devices can be connected to that same Wi-Fi, and even if one of the connected devices has malware, then my device is also under threat? It's actually a really good question. This was in response to a recent Ask Leo tip of the day, suggesting that you be on the lookout for fake hotspots. This isn't only about open hotspots. This is about any public internet. Risk number one, the owner. When you are using somebody else's internet, they become your ISP. They are providing your internet service, the very definition of the acronym. They can do what's called DNS poisoning, so that when you go to, say, google.com, you're not really going to google.com, you're going to a site that looks like google.com, but that instead asks you for login credentials, and of course, once you hand over your login credentials, it's some malicious person who now has your login credentials. Now, the good news here is that as long as you're connecting to reputable sites and places, they're trustworthy. They're just providing the internet as a service at the airport, at your coffee shop, at whatever. However, that leads us to risk number two, a faker. The tip of the day I referred to earlier referred specifically to making sure that you're connecting to the correct official hotspot associated with wherever you happen to be. For example, I was at the airport last week, and there I connected to SEA, for Seattle, free Wi-Fi. And that's the official Wi-Fi that's made available throughout the SeaTac airport. However, it is possible for someone to sit in the corner, create a hotspot, and call it something similar. They could, for example, call it SeaTac free Wi-Fi. If you were to connect through them, then they could do some of this other stuff I was telling you about as a malicious hotspot owner. Of course, that raises the question, how do you tell? Generally, there are two things I recommend. One is, if you can, find out the name that's supposed to be there before you connect. If that's not available, the thing to do then is essentially see if it's everywhere, especially in large venues. That hacker is probably just going to be sitting in a corner of one of the coffee venues within the facility. That means that their hotspot is only going to have a certain amount of range. If you leave that area, if you go to a different terminal, you go to a different gate, that hotspot probably is going to disappear because it'll be out of range. And yet, the official one, which is set up to cover the entire facility, will still be there. Honestly, the risk here is really low. There are better ways for hackers to use their time. Be cautious, but also be aware that it's not necessarily as huge a thing as some might make it out to be. Hotspot risk number three, your peers, the other people who happen to be in the same place, all using the same hotspot. This used to be, honestly, a really big issue, especially when hotspots were mostly open, as they still are. If you can connect to it without a password of any sort, it's an open hotspot. Basically, so much of the internet has moved to either SSL or HTTPS connections that it doesn't matter that somebody's listening in. Yeah, they can see what sites you're going to, but they cannot see the data that's being exchanged between you and that site because it's all encrypted. So, yes, your peers are an issue, but not as big of an issue as they used to be. Password-protected hotspots, where you actually have to enter a password to even connect to the hotspot, those are different. Those protect you from this kind of snooping. Those are basically have set up WPA, WPA2, WPA3 encryption on those connections so that between you and the hotspot is completely encrypted and you don't really have to worry about anybody snooping. Now, number four, and this is the one that I think a lot of people don't think about and ultimately is the root of the question that's been asked. Networking. When you're at home and you've got your Wi-Fi set up, you can still connect from one machine to another on your network. In fact, if you've got network discovery enabled, it's possible that you can actually see, okay, what machines are there on my network? Well, a lot of these public Wi-Fi scenarios are exactly the same way. You could, in theory, start network discovery and see who's there. Now, in general, your firewall on your computer is, in all likelihood, enabled by default, which protects you from those other people doing anything to your machine, potentially even seeing that your machine exists on the network at this public Wi-Fi hotspot. However, it can be entertaining when things are misconfigured. The scenario that I like to tell people about is that I went to a conference some years ago, before a lot of this stuff had been sussed out. One of the individuals in the back of our room fired up his laptop and did this whole network discovery thing. And not only was he able to see which machines were in the room, he was able to see what was on their hard drives. In fact, he went so far as to leave a file on everybody else's machine that he could that made it very clear how risky their current configuration was. The key here, of course, is to make sure that your firewall is turned on, that you've got the appropriate security things in place, and by and large, you'll be fine. It's not as big a deal as it used to be. As long as your security software is in place, as long as your firewall is turned on, chances are there's just not going to be a risk. Now, there are two things to consider if this is still too uncertain for you. One, consider using a VPN. I say that with the caveat that the VPN may not necessarily hide your machine from the other machines on the network. Some, I believe, do. So that's one solution. The other solution, and honestly, I found myself doing this occasionally as well, don't use the Wi-Fi. Use your mobile device's connection to the mobile network. By using my own mobile connection, I was isolated from everything else that all of these other people might have been doing had I been sharing the connection. So, bottom line here is, over the last few years, it's not nearly as risky as it once was to use a public hotspot. There are still risks, but by and large, I just did it. Using shared Wi-Fi in a couple of different airports, in the plane, not an issue. Perfectly safe and secure. For updates, for comments, for links related to this topic and more, visit askleo.com/158026. I'm Leo Notenboom. This is askleo.com. Thanks for watching.